Mr. Speaker, thank you for recognising me the 8th time. You know, there's nothing quite like an idea whose time has come. Mr. Speaker, there's nothing quite like an MP with an idea whose time has come. And I want to say all power to my colleague, Louisa Wall. Mr. Speaker, I won't take too much of the House's time. And I know there's a few people across the way, and even in my own party, that will be silently clapping. But what I despise most of all about the process that we are going through tonight, or what I'm going through, is the blatant gerrymandering of a process. And I want to say to my party that I am appalled by that behaviour. I am appalled at some of the behaviour that I've seen tonight, and the outright not telling the truth. Mr. Speaker, when something like this comes before the House, a person has to ask themselves, how does it impact on them? How does the decision that the House makes impact on myself, my wife, and my family? And the funny thing is, sir, is that most legislation impacts on you somehow. This, on the other hand, doesn't impact me one little bit. It doesn't affect me, it doesn't hurt me, it doesn't help me, it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my sanity, with my lack of sanity, with my happiness, with my lack of happiness. It has everything to do with other people's sanity, everything to do with other people's happiness, everything to do with how they choose to run their lives, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm remiss in I was a bit angry at the beginning, just a wee bit. But this speech, I dedicate this speech not only to my very dear colleague, Louisa Wall, but to my cousin, who 3 or 4 weeks ago passed away, to Catherine Henare, my first cousin. And so I was remiss in not saying her name. The other question that I like to ask myself when legislation is brought to the House is the sky going to fall in? And got to say that it ain't going to fall in. And tomorrow the sun, actually that might not be a good thing to say because there's a drought, but the sun's going to come up again tomorrow. And rain is on the way, but not because of this. I do want to have a free shot at. I want to make mention of the referendum issue that my former leader, colleague, party mate, bench mate, mentor, brother in arm. Want to say this to New Zealand First, that they are the only party in this House that steadfastly believes in the issue of referendum. And I take my hat off to New Zealand First for having that position throughout the years. If it was one thing that they have been consistent on, it is the issue of a referendum. But now I turn my little wee guns on those who have conveniently found the issue of a referendum. Those that have suddenly become revolutionary in the issue of a referendum. And if they're resolute in their determination to push the idea of a referendum. If I was to believe them, then why aren't we having a referendum on asset sales? Why aren't we having a referendum on all sorts and all manner of things? So to my colleagues, who I think and who I hold dear to my heart, including Mr. Bennett, who has tried vigorously all day to get me to support a referendum, I say to Mr. Bennett, it's a bit late, brother, to be thinking about a referendum. It's a bit late. And quite frankly, it is wrong to think that you can govern a country through the referendum issue. Mr. Speaker, it won't work. It has never worked. And Mr. Speaker, I don't support it. One of the final things I want to say, Mr. Speaker, if the institution, or the so-called institution of marriage was so sacrosanct, Mr. Speaker, then why are there so many people opting out of marriages? Why are there so many divorces, Mr. Speaker? Now, I'm not an expert on marriage. I've only been married for just over 365 days, Mr. Speaker. But what I do know is that why can't we offer the same opportunities to everybody rather than only a few people in our nation? Mr. Speaker, I've got to say that, and I suppose I should quote Dr. Paul Hutchison when he said in the first reading of the speech of the bill that he can't find any good reason to vote against it. And I too am like that, Mr. Speaker. And I think that everybody should be like Dr. Paul Hutchison and think very seriously and have a look at it and say they can't find any good reason to vote against this piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House, and I commend my colleague Louisa Wall.
Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to stand here today